Good morning. It's great to be here with you, and thank you for that very kind introduction. I'd like to make an introduction. It's a woman who has been a driving force in the last year with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which many of you work with. She is the Director of National Policy and also Public Affairs, and she happens to be my wife. I appreciate the fact in the introduction that it was noted that I have to be obedient. And yesterday, the House Education and Labor Committee passed 2 amendments to the Child Nutrition Act, which are really landmark amendments when it comes to introducing a whole new approach towards diet. One establishes a program for plant-based options for school cafeterias. And another one, first time, establishes a pilot program for vegan diets. We're finally beginning to bring about a change in the consciousness of the country as a result of the integrity that so many of you have demonstrated over a lifetime of commitment to animal rights. Because at the core of a vegan diet for most people is a commitment to compassion, is an understanding of the interconnectedness of all life, that we are one with nature, interdependent, interconnected. I think the central challenge of our times is to effect a reconciliation with nature. The split that occurred after the Industrial Revolution, or during the Industrial Revolution, where we saw a schism between mankind and the natural world, has become so pronounced that in the 20th and 21st century, we see a broad-based animal experimentation. We see endless mining, the destruction of rainforests, the ruining of natural habitat, the poisoning of water, the spoliation of land, the pollution of air. All of these are indications of how far we have gone to separate ourselves from the natural world. Indeed, the catastrophe in the Gulf of Mexico is a very powerful exclamation point on that separation. And we see the implications of the poisoning of the sea, the death of aquatic life, the ruining of vegetation. It is urgent that we come to a realization of the essential interconnectedness of all life, that we are one, and that this misunderstanding with which centuries of human beings have had to labor of a separation between ourselves and the natural world has to be replaced by a deep awareness and eventually an intuitive understanding of our connection with the natural world and of all the species which inhabit it. So I see your work on behalf of animal rights in a very broad perspective. And I see it as being essential to helping our nation and the entire world come to an awareness that that the animal kingdom has within it species which support our life and which we are dependent upon, not for food, but for being part of that seamless web of life. That animals have inherent rights. They may not be able to articulate them in the way that, let's say, Thomas Jefferson did so brilliantly when he was drafting the Declaration of Independence. They may not be able to post them in the way that the founders of this nation did, but they rely on us to be their voice, to act on their behalf, and to raise questions whenever we see their rights abused. Over and over again, we've seen the federal government become a vehicle for abusing the rights of animals. But the truth of the matter is, the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act arose as a means of protecting university laboratories from any kind of dissent so that they could continue to do the kinds of research in which they abuse animals, and more often than not, this research relates to some government purpose, generally the Department of Defense. When you look at experimentation done with squirrel monkeys, NASA uses the squirrel monkeys for cognitive research. But there's really no need to do that. There's no connection between the cognitive systems of squirrel monkeys, we would think, and human beings, in the same way that the Department of Defense, or the NIH rather, sanctions research of great apes for HIV. And yet the great apes express proteins in a different way than human beings. And so one might assume a result of the research on great apes would be immediately transferable to human beings, but it's not. So we often use animals in experimentation when they're not relevant to what it is that's being studied. I mean, that's one of the deeper cruelties of this. It's not necessary. And we're finding with changes in technology that there's other ways that do not involve cruelty, that we can do research without invoking any harm to any living species. We have to look at consciousness, which produces cruelty to animals. We saw a video that went viral over the internet 6 weeks ago about a farmhand in Ohio who had brutally abused some farm animals. And of course, some of you have been involved in making sure the world knows about that case and others, which really point out that there's a real lack of enforcement by officials in making sure that farm animals aren't abused. Many of you have been involved in rescues of animals, understanding the kind of treatment that they can be subjected to. I've worked with some of you on the confined animal feeding operation. Once you witness them, you see what animals are subjected to when they're jammed into these by the thousands of these small confined areas where they can't really function, but they're part of a food processing operation. And so there's some kind of an economics that's intended to justify it. If we're to achieve a transformation in our world which really respects the rights of all people and all species, we also have to look at transformation of our economic system. Because you and I know that we have a kind of economic system which is predatory, which is extractive, which is about using the earth and taking anything and everything out of it, and using all the species in a way that is to be capitalized upon. It's really antisocial when you get right to it. And it's against any higher principle of community. And so we are really at a point in human history where we're challenged to not just continue the commitments which we have on behalf of the rights of animals, but we're challenged to help to propel that evolutionary impulse which takes us to a place where we are the torchbearers for a new world where the awareness of human unity, the awareness of the unity of all species, becomes part of guiding principles for governance, for community, for social interaction. I came here this morning because I understand how important the work which each one of you is involved in. And I came here this morning because I want to urge you to continue to look for ways of working with you so that we may, in every way possible, help to effect a transformation in our society. In the next month, on my website at Kucinich.mov, I'm going to be launching a new initiative that relates to our connection with the earth and with the environment and with many of the things that we are concerned about. But I honor the everyday work that you're involved in. I honor the awareness which brings you here today. I honor the courage which many of you have had to demonstrate when you take a stand on behalf of defenseless creatures who have a right to survive. I honor your willingness to keep building a movement which will become part of a driving force for social change. I'm so grateful